the inaugural Just Peace Talks dialogue series. This is a series that's being brought together by the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation and the Ukrainian Association of South Africa. I'm very, very happy to welcome you all here today, and particularly to welcome our extraordinary panel of speakers who are going to explore the really human side of the conflict in Ukraine with us today. My name is Janet Jobson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. And our work really is about galvanizing the courage to heal societies. Our work is rooted very deeply in the human experience of tackling discrimination, oppression, and conflict in South Africa, but also around the world, and really trying to ensure that all work that we do and that people do around the world is deeply rooted in a sense of our common humanity. So that's what we're going to try and do today. The question of the war in Ukraine can really feel somewhat distant from us sitting at the bottom of the African continent here in South Africa. We do feel it. We feel it in the geopolitical debate. We feel it in the price of petrol, the price of food inflation. And we do hear the statistics in the news. But something that we felt at the foundation was somewhat missing is really a deep engagement with the human experience of conflict and war, a deep sense of our ability to build a global people solidarity between the human beings of the African continent and the human beings of Ukraine. Not just the geopolitical forces and debates, the policies of different states and nations, but really a common shared humanity. South Africa experienced colonialism for 400 years. The African continent is no stranger to colonialism. And as we've learned in the process of setting up this dialogue, for the people of Ukraine, this feels very much like an experience of a new wave of colonialism from a past that they have experienced too. And there's something very powerful about identifying what is very different about our contexts, but also what is shared. And that is something we're going to try and dive into today. We're going to try and dive into it with a sense of courage, as well as a sense of hope. I was reading up earlier a quote from the Arch that I think very powerfully informs our work at the foundation and should inform our conversation today. He said, "To choose hope is to step into the howling wind, bearing your chest to the elements, knowing that in time the storm will pass. Despair turns us inward. It is hope that sends us into the arms of each other." So today, my wish for this dialogue is that we stand very firmly in a hopeful posture, a posture in which we put our shared humanity to the fore, and we find the courage to step into that howling wind bearing our chests and finding each other's arms and finding a way to connect as human beings. To quickly introduce our panel, we're very, very excited and honored to have the privilege of Mrs. Graça Machel joining us today. Mrs. Machel is very well known to those of us in Southern Africa as one of our great homegrown leaders. She is also the Deputy Chair of the Elders, a global organization of esteemed and eminent global leaders. She's extremely well known as being an activist for women and children and is a powerful voice for justice globally, working in a number of different forums, as well as through her own Graça Machel Trust. We're very, very grateful to have you joining us here today, Ms. Graça. Our next speaker will be Professor Miroslav Marinovic. Miroslav is a human rights activist. He was the founder of Amnesty International in Ukraine, as well as founder of the Helsinki Group. He's now the vice rector of the Ukrainian Catholic University, but retains a very strong activist position in Ukrainian society. Welcome, Miroslav.
Thank you, welcome.
Next, we're joined by Victor Oshen from Uganda. Victor is an extraordinary young African. He's a Tutu Leadership Fellow from the African Leadership Institute, and he's the founder and executive director of the African Youth Initiative Network in Uganda. And he's been working very powerfully in Uganda and across the rest of the African continent, and now globally, on the traumatic effects of conflict and how to do the work of healing from trauma caused by various types of conflict in societies. And finally, we're joined by Oleksandra Matvichuk, who's joining us from Kyiv, and she's the head of the Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, a human rights lawyer and an activist. The way we're going to work today is that we'll start with a dialogue between our speakers. I'll be posing some questions to each of them, and then we'll open up to a broader engagement with our audience today. So if you do have burning questions for the panelists, please do type them into the Q&A chat, and we'll be able to see them there and engage with them in the second part of today's discussion. But let's dive into the dialogue with our panelists. Mam Graça, I'll start with you, and we really would love to get your perspective on why the conflict in a place like Ukraine should matter to the people of Africa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this debate and dialogue with the extraordinary people I'm meeting through the screen. And I'm very touched that they bring the Ukrainian experience and perspectives. I see my son, Victor, I have been working with for many years now. And this is an opportunity for me also to listen and to learn. And let me begin by make a statement which is to free me from a sense of conflict of interest. I have been introduced as the deputy chair of the elders. And of course, I'm humbled, but at some time I carry with the pleasure the fact that I belong to the elders, which was established by Madiba, and the first chair of the elders is my very special friend and brother, Desmond Tutu. But today I'm going to be talking as Graça Machel. I would like to make it clear that not everything I'm going to say here represents the thinking and the positions of the elders. And having said this, I'll try to reply to your question. I am an African woman. I am an African grandmother. I carry with me the pain and sometimes a sense of despair of millions and millions of African women, African girls, African children who have been impacted by war. And not only in our days, I mean, you can just go and you see what is happening in Mali, in Burkina Faso. It has been happening in Central Africa. It is happening in my own country, in Mozambique, northern Mozambique, just to mention a few. But conflict is raging in Africa. And the fate of millions of women and children and adolescents and young people who are in the front line, it is something which is not only in my heart, but it is weighing very, very heavily in my, let me call, this is my time where I was thinking I would be resting, I would be enjoying my old age, and but I have to carry this pain and watch what is happening. So when you ask me why the conflict in Ukraine matters to Africa, for me, I have to tell you, I was terribly disturbed when this conflict started. in something like 1 week or 10 days, if you like, millions, literally millions of families, of people, I mean, crossing the borders and desperately trying to enter into trains to find a safe. I said to myself, oh my God, I've seen this in my own continent, but never in such a concentration in time, and even to be millions in 1 week. And I have to tell you, that was an experience which is still in my mind, in my heart, and I identify myself with those women, with those children. Some of them, children couldn't even understand what was going on. But they were dragged by their parents and into these planes. And then I said to myself, I've seen this before in my continent. And it is like the camera has shifted from Africa then to another place, but it's exactly the same drama. So the first answer to you is what has happened and is happening in Ukrainian. It is what is happening in our own continent. And as human as we are, we don't feel differently. We feel exactly the same way. And perhaps as I started saying it happening with such a speed and concentration, we even were amazed how it could happen. With that intensity, with that concentration of people in time, and to say, we had never thought this could happen again. And it is happening. So for us, it's a human tragedy. And as human tragedy, it speaks to us the same way it speaks to the people of Ukraine. There's no distinction at all. Some people did make some comments, of course, in terms of how the response was. I'm not talking about how the response. I'm saying how those people felt, those who had to be uprooted brutally, quickly, in seconds sometimes, from their environment, and to face exile with no hope, with not knowing even what is going to happen. That, for me, it's a human experience which speaks to Africans exactly the same way as to anyone. So when it comes to that point, there's no distinction. It speaks to us, and we feel the pain. Those families which have been disrupted, yes, they are human families. It's not because they belong to one nation or the other. No, these human families. There's a social fabric which was disrupted in Ukrainian. It is social fabric. It's part of our own. It's part of our feelings as human. And of course, there's also the fact that war, it's war. And war affects a human in a way it doesn't care. It doesn't care where you are, how you are. No, it is blindly cruel. War is blindly cruel. And this is what I feel that we as Africans, we have to look at that part of the world and feel, when is it going to end? Exactly the same way we are asking, when is it going to end in any part of our continent? This is the human tragedy I'm talking about. And when you give me the opportunity to talk about the impact, not in the human directly, but in the impact on our nations in the sense of how we eat, how how really we transport ourselves to go from home to school, how all those things have been affected. That is the impact on the economy. But I want to focus at this point in time on the impact on human beings. So those mothers, they are mothers like Ukrainians, like Africans. They are simply mothers, and they feel the pain the same way. Those children are African children, yes, but they're Ukrainian children, and they feel exactly the same pain as African children. And those old people who have been affected, they are simply human beings. It doesn't matter that they are in Ukraine, and we feel this as our own tragedy. So I will stop here for now. And when you give me the opportunity to bring other aspects of how it has affected our daily life and how it has affected our systems, which makes us, make sense of what it means to be living in a normal situation. I'll talk about that at the beginning. But it matters to Africans because it's a human tragedy. And human tragedy doesn't choose. The place doesn't choose. The color doesn't choose. Even the level of development which a country has, human tragedy and human pain is exactly the same to all of us.